Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Today on CityCast DC, we have a new budget for 2025, and it's very different from the one that we talked about with Mayor Bowser a couple weeks ago. The Washington Post's Michael Brice-Saddler is here to tell us the differences between the two and what the council's priorities are. Today is Monday, June 24th. I'm interim executive producer Julia Karen, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Michael.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good. All right, so we have this new budget. Obviously, Mayor Bowser submitted one. There's been this back and forth going on for a couple months or so, but we have a finalized one that council voted on. What does this budget say about the council's priorities to you?
Well, for me, it shows the council doing a lot of the same things they sought to do last year when the mayor presented her budget. There were some steep cuts. This year, her messaging was about shared sacrifices, and she talked about these core service areas that were of vital importance, being downtown, education, public safety, and there were about $500 million in cuts overall. So she framed this as, I'm sacrificing too. She wasn't able to put money into her housing production trust fund, which is super important. She raised taxes, which is something she didn't want to do, but the city's finances are of concern to everybody. So there's a need to raise revenue somehow. The council took this a step further. They raised taxes additionally, specifically, they raised taxes further on paid family leave, and they added a real property tax increase on homes worth more than $2.5 million. So these are supposed to add $100 million more in revenue that the council is using towards some of these housing initiatives. Some of the areas that were cut by the mayor, a lot of those are programs for people in need of help, social services, and things of that nature.
Got it. So your colleague, Megan Flynn, wrote a really great article about the winners and losers of this budget, at least the one that the council is proposed for 2025 that still needs to get passed. Bowser has to sign off of it. And a couple of the big winners are like downtown revitalization and the police force. How are those policies and how is this budget different from what we had in 2024 and what they want in 2025?
Well, as far as policing goes, there's a pretty consensus view among lawmakers after last year's crime spike that police staffing is a concern. So the council funded what the mayor requested for police, and that's supposed to generate the potential to hire at least 270 more officers. So there's a hope that they can fortify the police ranks. And there weren't really any fights over public safety funding that we saw in previous years when there was more momentum toward criticizing how police worked in the city. So that's one thing that the council and the mayor really did agree on in this budget. When it comes to downtown, I'd say there's a similar shared acknowledgement and importance on revitalizing downtown to help with that revenue I was talking about, to make sure those streams of income for the city are coming in so that some of these programs can be funded without additional tax increases. So that was a winner. I mean, you could also look at the fact that we have given Ted Leonsis $500+ million to revitalize Capital One Arena downtown. But beyond that, you have efforts toward office to residential conversion. You have money for pop-up programs in retail spaces that are vacant, just in trying to get more foot traffic to the downtown core.
Yeah. So one thing I find interesting, obviously, the city is giving over $500 million to Ted Leonsis for the stadium. One thing you guys noted was that housing aid programs, not actual physical housing, but housing aid programs are actually kind of a loser in this budget. Was that a council priority? Was that a Bowser priority? Where did the line get drawn in the sand for that?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, the mayor had to cut even into her own housing production trust fund, which generates affordable housing in the city. And the council restored some money toward that. And they also restored some money toward programs like emergency rental assistance, rapid rehousing, and housing vouchers, adding 600 vouchers through the council's budget process. So there are gains in all of those areas, but you're coming from a really low bar. So overall, housing was a loser because housing advocates for the homeless, were hoping to see numbers way greater than what those areas were actually funded at. Even though the council tried to find creative ways to further fund some of these programs, they're still lower than the levels they were in FY24. So that's why that area is a loser.
Got it. Obviously, like the police force is getting a ton more money. But one thing that is kind of lacking from this budget is a real public safety plan. Were there conversations about bringing those two things together and making them a package deal? Because for now, they seem pretty disparate and separate.
Well, it's an interesting situation with this public safety plan. The council has asked the mayor to do this as part of the big public safety legislation they passed earlier in the year, the omnibus bill. And while that was passed, it wasn't actually funded in this budget to be implemented properly. So Bowser has also kind of rejected this idea that there needs to be some type of comprehensive plan. She says the policy that the city rolls out every day and applies to its police every day is the public safety plan. So it'll be curious if that ever materializes, but that's not something that was actually funded in the mayor or council's version of the budget.
Yeah, I find that really interesting because obviously if the police are a winner, like they're getting more money for staffing, obviously. But part of that has to be at a certain level, like implementing something to make sure that when those police sign on, like there is real theory and practice behind that, no?
Right. Well, the public safety plan goes beyond police. It's this comprehensive citywide, like all these different agencies that have a stake in juvenile crime and victim services. How are they interacting with each other? The violence prevention agencies that have gotten a lot of attention. How are they all interacting with each other within this ecosystem of criminal justice to make sure they're the best outcomes? The council wants to look at that more closely and have something that's kind of codified and written down to explain that.
Hey DC, let's talk trees. We all know planting trees is one of the best ways to take care of our environment, our community, and our health. They combat climate change, cool our city, clean our air and water, improve our physical and mental health, bring our communities together. I mean, the list goes on and on. But what if we don't have any inhabitable space for trees? What if, in order to save our trees, we first need to save the soil in which those trees are planted? KC Trees is a local nonprofit working to conserve DC's green spaces and nearby nature that makes our city so great to live in. Visit kctrees.org to learn more about how to protect our green spaces and natural areas. Experience a live performance with premium seating at Warner Theater or the Fillmore Silver Spring. Live Nation Premium amenities totally change the concert experience with things like complimentary parking and private entry. Members also have access to in-seat wait service and exclusive food and beverage menus. Trust me, there is no better way to experience a live performance of a band, comedian, or even podcaster you love. Premium members get access and offerings before doors open to the VIP speakeasy-style 1924 lounge at Warner Theater and Vertigo Lounge at the Fillmore. Visit premium.livenation.com for more information or contact Mary Claire Griffin at maryclairegriffin@livenation.com or at 202-626-8255.
Whoa. Landing an account this big will totally change my landscaping business. It's gonna mean hiring more guys and more equipment and new trucks for the new guys to drive the new equipment in. I don't know if I'm ready.
You can do this, and Ford Pro FinSimple can help. Our experts are ready to make growing pains less painful for your business with flexible financing solutions that meet the needs of your business today when you need them. Get started at fordpro.com/financing.
All right, so obviously we've talked a little bit about the fact that Mayor Bowser's original budget and the budget that we're getting right now there are some gaps. There are some big differences. Do you think that these differences amount to kind of an existential crisis for the city? Or like, where do you find that they're actually simpatico and aligned on any of these issues?
Right. I mean, I think this is a normal part of the process. The mayor has priorities, and actually the council's not a monolith because they have all their individual priorities for the wards or areas they represent or agencies they oversee or committees that they lead on. It's not necessarily, yes, mayor versus council. It's everybody's priorities and not enough money to give everyone what they want. So I would say it's not abnormal to see these types of divisions. And we saw some unification as far as downtown priorities, as far as policing, but there are other areas like education, for example, where the mayor has been pretty insistent on her vision for how schools should be funded, whereas the council has taken a different approach, pulling money from the central office of DCPS and putting it toward individual schools, which is something they'll say are better for the schools, will help them retain teachers. But the mayor saying, doing something like that is going to actually take away resources that benefit all schools. So those types of divides go beyond the budget process because they are debated all the time. But the budget is really where you see the money move and it gets more intense.
Yeah, I find it really interesting that, like, obviously this is where people's priorities are like, here's what we value as most important in literal dollars. At the same time that this is happening, the CFO of the city, Glenn Lee, has said, actually, we have this bill that is due. And that's part of why Mayor Bowser had made some of these cuts. Do you think that Mayor Bowser's right when she says that we're set for an even more austere budget next year? Like, are we going to keep having the same argument in 2026, 27, 28?
That's such a good question. My guess is that, yes, we'll be back here next year and beyond because the city's finances moving forward are still a question mark. They're hoping these revenue raisers will fill in some of the gaps. But the mayor's point is if you're increasing taxes to fund programs at a lower level than they were the previous year, you're going to have to keep doing that to fill in gaps. Like, it's not a perfect solution to just raise taxes to fund a program maybe for a year or two. Eventually that money runs out. People are relying on these services and you run into the same issue all over again. So I have a feeling we'll be back debating the same issues next year, including whether to raise taxes more, including which programs need to be reduced or cut. And you'll see the same advocacy groups coming out and saying, hey, people are really needing these programs. You can't just take them away. You can't cut emergency rental assistance. And the argument some lawmakers have made with things like ERAP is that if you're cutting into the prevention program, you're increasing the risk of people falling into more expensive homelessness programs and emergency housing programs that cost the city more money at the tail end of the process. So it's a very interesting debate.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're looking into your crystal ball, obviously you're covering the council and the mayor. When you look into your crystal ball for the big issues and funding issues we're going to see in 2026, in 2027, you mentioned the ERAP program, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. Is that something that you foresee in those years being an issue? Are there other issues where you're like, yes, like we're going to have this argument again and again and again as a social service?
Yeah, I think housing and I think homelessness prevention services are going to be a cause for concern moving forward. Yes, because of the amount of housing security in the region and in DC. Budgets are tight, not just for the city, but for the actual people who live here. And the mayor's in a difficult spot and the council's in a difficult spot because there's just a finite amount of money. So no one wants to say, hey, we're going to take away a lifeline from someone. But at the same time, if you need to raise taxes on everybody else to fund things, it just gets tricky to have that be the permanent solution. So the council actually did something interesting in this budget, which was fund a position for someone within the council office whose job is basically just to look at areas of waste and overspending. And I think that's really where the solution to this would come from, is to figure out what's been duplicative, what maybe can be folded into something else, or maybe what's not being used to the level that maybe some of the agencies say they're being used, and trim the fat. And hopefully you can find more money that way. But in reality, if it was that easy, it would have been done already.
So Mayor Bowser, when she talked to us, said that budgets are actually fun because they're like this big, intricate puzzle that you kind of have to put together. Is this a puzzle that Mayor Bowser approves of? And when is she set to sign this thing?
So there's actually one more vote on the budget coming Tuesday, where they will vote on the set of laws basically that are necessary to be implemented in order for their spending decisions to go into effect. It's quite technical, but that's expected to go through. And as far as what the mayor will do, if she'll sign it, we'll see. But I think by and large, there were a lot of areas of agreement, although she disagreed with Like, for example, the educational component, she disagreed with the tax increases that the council added to her own tax increases. These are the types of things she's objected to in the past as well, in past budgets. And, it still passes through. So it's such a massive document, and there's so many components to it that her making a decision to reject the entire budget based on one or two things is not something I've seen in my time in DC. So, I think when the mayor talks about the budget being a fun process, it is interesting to see how it changes so dramatically from the time she introduces it to the time the council passes it. For example, we have some new things in this budget that the council did, like they created a new child tax credit and they enhanced the earned income tax credit to help parents and families with small children. So that's a big boost to new parents. And then there's a whole debate that's going to continue on Tuesday about the future of sports betting in the city. I won't get into all the details of that right now, but it could be interesting. So please encourage your listeners to read along or follow along with that on Tuesday, because it's an important debate.
Michael, thank you for helping us wrap our heads around this monstrosity of a puzzle and a document.
It's my pleasure.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter called Hey DC. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.